Guys, good morning. So this video, it's kind of practice because I have a research conference tomorrow, and I just wanted to time myself to make sure I can talk about this for at least 8 to 10 minutes. But today we're talking about Etruscan women, okay? Now, if you guys don't know, the Etruscans were ancient civilization in Italy, in this region called Etruria, which is now modern day Tuscany. And they were from around the 8th century BC to the 3rd century BC. And then following that, they weren't annihilated or anything. It was really just that the Romans kind of slowly started kind of consolidating that land under their dominion. The Etruscans kind of became the Romans. And for a while their origins were a little bit mysterious, a little controversial, maybe a little it was kind of skewed in mystery. But nowadays it's widely believed that they weren't invaders from the south or something. They're just kind of indigenous people, I guess. So that's a little on the Etruscans. They were also very religious. They did a lot of divinations, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from primary sources, but it's in the form of a lot of artifacts from tombs, and a lot of kind of figurines, a lot of things like that, a lot of funerary art, because the Etruscans didn't leave behind that much writing. It was more so, we have writing about them from the Greeks, because the Greeks left a bunch of writing. You can go and buy Plato at the bookstore. So the Greeks definitely did leave a lot of stuff, and they do talk about the Etruscans there. So the Greeks were before the Etruscans, so they did interact with them a bit. And in fact, the Etruscan language, we don't have a complete understanding of it. We can kind of see that the script came from the ancient Greek script, and we can only make out a few words, but we really don't have a grasp on how the whole language was, how it works. We can read certain names and things on plaques, but really beyond that, there's not much. So, moving on to women. The women in Etruscan society were in a unique position compared to other civilizations. For one, the upper class women, which is honestly where most of this evidence comes from, because those were the women that we have artifacts from, at least that group of that kind of social status. And so they had pretty equal opportunities as men. They were allowed to go out in public, eat and drink with them. The women could own their own slaves. They could own land. They could go out and buy things for themselves. It was really like modern times, a woman can just buy things. And then as well as their names, the Etruscans were not matriarchal. In fact, evidence suggests they were patriarchal. But despite this, women could keep their names. In fact, a lot of them did. And this is evidenced in on their tombs. It's just their name. It's not name wife of or name daughter of. It's just her name. So that's pretty interesting, I think, that it wasn't she was owned by her husband. And so for a while, it was also believed that these social freedoms meant that they were very kind of promiscuous. And this idea came from the Greeks, because the Greeks, they didn't mess with women, bro. They did not like them. I mean, I guess they liked them, but their place in society was much different from the men. They were relegated to the domestic sphere. They were not allowed to go out, participate in the public, go eat and drink. So the Greeks wrote about the Etruscans and how it was appalling to them that these women had these opportunities, to engage in similar manners as men, to kind of engage in the public sphere. And so, but now we know that the Greeks were they were overreacting a bit, I think, because all the evidence we have, it wasn't that the Etruscan women were prostitutes and stuff. It was just that their society allowed them to kind of flourish in public. So the second aspect that I wanted to talk about is religion. The Etruscans were very religious. They had a big old pantheon of gods, and they were more so, I guess, folk folk gods, and less kind of like they weren't those same gods as the Greeks or the Romans, you know, like they didn't do the Roman thing where they just switched their names. They had their own unique gods and goddesses. There might have been some overlap, but it was more so like praying to forces of nature, I believe. And they did a lot of divination, which is the kind of the practice of trying to read things in the future, you know, understand like what's going to be coming up. And so we have a lot of imagery from these sites, you know, old like religious sites near these tombs that have been excavated, and they have a lot of feminine imagery. We have images of women kind of, it seems like they're leading kind of like a congregation of sorts, like a procession, you know. They have these artifacts in their hands and they're walking down. If you guys look up the Bocanera plaque, you'll see what I'm talking about. And there's also, this leads us to believe that Etruscan women could act as priestesses. This wasn't a role relegated just to men, you know? So they could definitely participate in that. And then we have a lot of these things called votive offerings, which were these little offerings, you know, kind of like, they could be dolls of sorts, anatomical. And a lot of it was anatomical. We have, and for men and women, there were like men anatomical parts and female anatomical parts. You know, we have like heads, arms, legs, and like reproductive organs, intestines. It's kind of gross, but they were offering them, and they weren't like real. Like it was like art in the shape of that. And so a lot of these were little dolls. They were feminine imagery used in these rituals. And it wasn't just that the women were like using these to pray to women goddesses. Like it was men and women, like that the Etruscan females were offering these up to. So I thought that was interesting. You know, there's definitely an equality there in the religious aspect, and they were highly religious. So it's cool to see that was such a kind of integral part of the female experience in Etruria. And moving on to the last part, I just want to talk a little bit on their relationships, and I guess being a mother, like what it meant to be a mother. So the Etruscans were monogamous. They weren't really like harems or things of that nature. Like it was very much family focused, like one wife and like, I don't know, a bunch of kids. It was kind of the OG nuclear family, you know, in like 800 BC, which I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, so the women were expected to be married, but it wasn't like, as I mentioned earlier, it's not like they became the property of their husband. It was more so seen as an honor, like they're fulfilling their like, I guess their sacred duty, if you want to call it. Because the family unit was seen as very important, because that's who would raise like the next generation, and they wanted high quality people being raised, you know, to this kind of aristocratic view of like everything they had. You know, they want quality people being raised, and for that it takes quality parents, you know, like people that really care about their role and are willing to step up. And they highly valued childbirth, like maternity. Like they really respected the process, and in a lot of their art they depict nursing, they depict kind of like more sexual acts as well as childbirth. And this was something that the Greeks did not, they were not about to show this. They were very much kept this hidden, while the Etruscans more so elevated it, kind of wanting to I don't know, just give it the veneration that they felt they deserved. And so yeah, there's a lot of art remaining with that, with the childbirth, nursing, and kind of the familial unit as a whole. We have sarcophagi that depict a man and woman lying together, and they're both seen as like equal. It's not like the man's more adorned than the woman or anything like that. So yeah, in conclusion, Etruscan women were offered much more liberties, freedoms, kind of opportunities than their contemporaries at the time. I think it's interesting to look back on this and see how they were kind of forward thinking, you know, and even though they were from like over 2,000 years ago, nearly 3,000, or I guess like 3,000 years ago, right? So it's just, I thought it was interesting to look back and kind of reflect on this, like what does this say about Western society? because here in the U.S., we took a lot of our, I guess, foundations from ancient Greece. But it's interesting to see that this civilization, since a lot of their evidence really wasn't apparent until more recent years, it's interesting to see that women back then have more rights than some women in parts of the world now. And I thought that was interesting. That's why I decided to research this. I thought it was pretty cool. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something. What am I? I'm at like 10 minutes. Okay. I think I'll do good. And then I got like 5 minutes for answering questions. I guess if you're watching this, you don't gotta ask me a question. You can just look it up. And I think I was right about most of the things I said, because I read through like a million sources for this stuff. I'm just trying to memorize it, like I'm not reading off anything. I was just looking at the pictures. But my last video did get more than 1 view, so I'll be uploading more. I've got 1 subscriber now, so this is 1 subscriber special as well. Yeah, shout out the Etruscans. Shout out Italy. I'm not Italian too. I don't know how many non-Italians are gonna be at this research thing, but hey, peace.